The final widget in our SEO widget pack is the social meta tags. So this is for adding something called Open Graph to your website, which is primarily used by Facebook, and also some information for Twitter. So if a user or somebody who's visiting your site is to share your information or your URL on a social network, the social network is going to be able to pull in the correct information and display a beautiful result. So because this is going to be specific to each page on your site, you want to use the social meta tags widget on individual pages. So I'm on the About page on my site right now. I'm just going to drag the widget out onto the page. And again, all of these widgets, because they're not actually adding something to the page itself, you can have them off to the side. So I'm going to open up the panel and let's look through the options we have here. We have two sections. We have Open Graph or Facebook, and we have Twitter. So for Open Graph, the first option we have is Facebook App ID. That's actually not required. We added it because Facebook occasionally throws up an error saying that it's missing an app ID. But you know what? You do not need to have an app ID in there. It's much more important you have your site name, your content description, and an image for your site. So if I went ahead and said this is the SEO widget pack as my site name, and description, we could say a powerful pack for SEO, blah, blah, blah. Sounds good. And then we just need to add an image. Now for image size, you can probably Google and find some recommendations here. But in our testing, we found that big images worked really well. So something like, at the very least, 500 by 500 or higher, probably even more like 1,000 by 1,000 would be better. But you can play around with the types of images you put in here and how they're sharing to these social networks to see what works best. Next up, we have the Twitter section, and Twitter gives you two options to have just a summary or a summary with a large image. Of course, we can add an image and some alt text for that image. So let me show you a sample link. I've created a website here, the most boring website in the world with one block of text on it, and I've added the social meta tags widget. Within, I've added some information. It says site name is MuseThemes SEO Widgets. I put a little sentence about that this is a powerful set of widgets designed to blah, blah, blah. Then I've got an image. This is an image of a waterfall, I think, and I set the size to 600 by 600. I also did the same thing on Twitter. So I've published this up, and the URL is here. It looks just like this, SEO Widgets, Social Meta, so nothing else on the page. Now on the bottom of this widget panel, there's two links. There is one that says Open Graph Debugger, and the other is Twitter Card Validator. Basically, these are testing tools for each network that allow you to see what they're going to pull in for information when somebody shares your site on their networks. So if I open up the Open Graph Debugger, it looks like this, and it says, enter a URL to see what information is being used when shared on Facebook. So if I take the URL of the sample page I set up, and I drop it in there, and I click Debug, it scrapes the URL and it tells us what it's seeing. So it's finding this URL, it's seeing the image. This is the image I picked. It's pulling in some information. This is the information we set in the content description. And it just says home. Now this is actually the title of our page that we can set directly in Muse. So everything seems to be working really well. And if you go ahead and update the information on this widget, you can click scrape again and it'll rescrape that link and pull in all of the new information. So same thing for Twitter. If we click on the link in the bottom of the panel and we enter in a URL, we should get a preview of what Twitter is going to see when shared. However, if with this link, if I click preview card, you'll notice that we get an error. It says unable to render, and it says fetching this page failed because it's denied by robots.txt. This is because it's a Business Catalyst temporary site. BC is restricting the scraping of this because of the robots.txt file. So I actually have another test link from our testing guideline right here. And let's give that a try. It's a more public link. So if I do that and preview the card, then you'll see what it's going to look like when this site is shared on Twitter. Again, all of these widgets are designed to just help these networks and search engines better understand your content, to encourage users to share, users to visit the site, which at the end of the day is the goal. Thanks again for watching, and best of luck with these SEO widgets.